The Milwaukee Bucks and Los Angeles Lakers are in really big trouble. Like, I don't mean Cavs coming in the 4th seed in 2018 type trouble. I'm not talking about, like, the Magic hitting a game winner on Game 1 in 2019 on the Raptors trouble. I'm talking, like, LeBron about to put down D-Wade or, like, DeMarcus Cousins on a contender type ad. Seriously, they are in trouble. Both teams have aspirations of getting to and winning the finals. The Lakers, snapping a 7-year playoff drought with a top 3 player of all time, were ready to claim the throne yet again as the NBA's most dominant franchise. Milwaukee, having no real superstar since Lou Alcindor, that's how long it's been, folks, finally have a figurehead player in a small market, not unlike LeBron in Cleveland. But this team doesn't have an incompetent owner, so they've been at times far and away the best team in the league, led by Giannis Antetokounmpo's transcendent abilities. They've literally checked every box ever formulated for a successful team. Be the league's best defensive team, be a top 3 offense, have an MVP, have a defensive player of the year candidate as well, have another all-star, adjust to your era. They've hit every single marker for a historic team except one: a championship. Nobody talks about how good the Seattle Supersonics were in the 90s. It didn't matter that they won 64 games and was a top 3 offense and defense, a stat that almost guarantees you a championship in most cases. No one cares about the Cavaliers in 2009 that had the best record in the league. And even more recently, no one cares about the 2018 Rockets that was a hamstring away from beating the quote-unquote greatest team of all time. It would be in Milwaukee's best interest to not just be one of these teams, especially with an upcoming free agent that happens to be one of the best basketball players to ever touch a court. LeBron would hate to be the player that ended up with only 3 rings in his career, unable to get a chip for the most storied franchise in basketball. For him, it would be disgraceful and a huge hit on his legacy. But both of these teams are in danger, very real danger, of that happening to them. The signs were there from the very beginning in Orlando, and in this heightened sense of urgency that is the playoffs, their sloppiness is being exposed big time. So far, their wins have come from lucky breaks, from Dame Lillard's dislocated finger and KCP remembering how to shoot, to Orlando putting up a putrid 23% from 3. But outside of that, Milwaukee and Los Angeles were 2 of the worst teams in the restart. While their record seems bad enough, both of them ended up 3-5, the fine print shows up something that's really scary. Of the 21 somewhat competitive teams in the bubble, there are 10 teams that had a significantly lower net rating than they did before the shutdown. And at the very bottom of the list, you have Milwaukee and LA. And it was by no small margin either. No, Milwaukee fell from a dominant net rating of 11.2, meaning that they were winning their games on an average of 11 points a game, to negative 0.8. Meaning that they were losing games by almost an entire point. That's a difference of 12 points a game. In other words, they played like a team that was projected to have 32 less wins than their normal selves in an 82-game season. That's the difference from being a number 1 seed to barely making the playoffs. And LA had it even worse than that. They went from a net rating of +7 to negative 6.6, which made a difference of negative 13.6 points a game. Meaning that instead of playing like a team that only has 32 less wins than normal, they played like a team that had 37 less wins than normal. That's literally almost the same amount that the Cavs dropped off after LeBron left Cleveland for the first time. You know, that time when they went from the 1st seed in the league to the 1st pick in the draft. Now, as to why this is happening, there's a number of reasons, some that are similar and some that are completely different. It's no coincidence that 2 number 1 seeds ended up with bad records, because their records didn't count. LA and Milwaukee were basically guaranteed to get the 1st seed, meaning that they could focus their time on finding out what worked for them. Remember, Los Angeles had to add both Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith, both of which that are doing pretty bad. Dion Waiters in the bubble games averaged 12 points a game on 42% shooting and 23% from 3, while JR averaged, get this, 3 points a game on 32% shooting. And to top it all off, he was averaging 9% from 3. And all of this is after losing Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo, leaving a team that was already weak in the guard spots even more so. As a result, Coach Frank Vogel was forced to experiment with all types of lineups to see what would fit, and give LeBron his appropriate rest for the playoffs. He went from 35 minutes a game before the bubble to 31.7 during. This resulted in 33 different real lineups in the 8 seeding games, almost double the amount that they tried in the first 8 games of the season, and basically triple of what Portland tried in the bubble at 12. Now, for Milwaukee, Mike Budenholzer is notorious for giving players balanced minutes. And that's coming to hurt them pretty bad. In game 1 versus the Magic, Giannis had a whopping 34.4 minutes, almost the same amount as James Harden. But there's a slight difference in the games that the Bucks and the Rockets played on game 1. Houston handed the Thunder an L in a quick fashion, while the Bucks, after the first 6 minutes of the game, never led again. In the bubble, Giannis averaged 25.7 minutes a game, along the likes of JJ Redick and Seth Curry. They also tried out 34 different lineups, most of which obviously did not end up working. When it came time to flip the switch into playoff mode, Budenholzer came out with a 10-man rotation in a playoff game. Now, you could argue all you want that the same thing happened to the Raptors last year, that the Magic are injured, there's no reason to take this serious and all that, and I would agree with you if this was a regular season. But no, the Bucks have been out of whack this entire month, and to dilly-dally with your MVP in a series contention is straight up inexcusable. This is part of why they gave up 4 straight to the Raptors last year, because of the persistence of this quote-unquote balanced lineup. It's good enough to win you 60 games and get you 4 All-Stars, sure, but in a global pandemic and Mickey Mouse galore, you gotta rely on your surest thing, and Budenholzer hasn't ever done so, which is why he keeps losing to teams that do. But that's not the only issue on their Mickey Mouse plate, oh no. In the bubble, the Bucks have been the 10th best defensive team in the league, allowing 110 points a game, which isn't all that great of course. But it gets even worse when factoring in the pre-bubble defense, where they allowed just 101.6 points a game, a ridiculous number for today's league, meaning that their defense dropped from historical numbers to average. Not good if you want to come home with a Larry O'Brien. Traditionally, the Bucks have worked with a system that calls for priority in the paint, meaning that they let threes be threes. Not necessarily the best strategy in today's NBA, but hey, if it works, it works. Milwaukee was one of the best defensive teams in history before the restart. But then something big happened. Teams started taking more threes against them. Something about this restart made it fashionable to take more threes. And taking more means making more. Teams are taking threes at a 6% higher clip in the bubble, and it's hurting Milwaukee. See, not only does Milwaukee allow the most amount of 3-point attempts, they've also allowed the most amount of wide open 3-point attempts. Quite literally 5 more a game in the bubble than normal. And again, if you take more shots, particularly open ones, then you're gonna probably make some of them. And that's exactly what teams have been doing. Teams against Milwaukee, just solely because of this slight change, are averaging 7 points a game more than before the restarts. Add that to a drop-off in paint and defense, and that's how you take a difference from historical to just average. This happens because of rotation issues, sloppiness, all of these different factors that make Milwaukee look like a completely different team, and a lot less of a threat. They should count themselves lucky that they might go against the Pacers next, or Jimmy Butler, who doesn't particularly like taking 3-point shots. But whichever team wins the 4-5 matchup, I'd have them still beating the Bucks based off what we've seen so far. And if not that, then at least giving them a run for their money. And even if they make it past, I would bet good money that the Raptors or Celtics will handle them pretty easily in the Eastern Conference Finals. They've not been a championship caliber team, and that will continue to be exposed in the coming games, unless they get their act together. It's been done before. Obviously, there was the Raptors last year and San Antonio in 2003, who won the finals after losing their first game in the playoffs. But the thing is, they don't have Greg Popovich as their coach, or a prime Kawhi Leonard. And this 8 seed isn't at full strength. Time will tell otherwise, but right now the Milwaukee Bucks are not advancing. Now, to compare to the Lakers dilemma, take all of the problems I just talked about with the Bucks and multiply it by 2. Now, don't get me wrong, Milwaukee's also been struggling offensively in the bubble, but they don't compare to the pickle that the Lakers are in. Not only did LA slip from a top 3 defense to Midtown, they've also established themselves as one of the worst offenses in the bubble. Partially due to the loss of Avery Bradley, partially due to the slow start of LeBron James, and partially to Kyle Kuzma and Markieff Morris being the only 3-point shooters on the team that aren't below average, the Lakers offense generated less points than everybody in the bubble except the Washington Wizards, without Bradley Beal. Now, I know the big question is why, and everyone knows the answer too, because they can't hit a shot. Caruso, who's typically a decent 3-point shooter, is hovering around 15% from 3. Danny Green, whose literal role is to play defense and, shoot threes, is hitting at a 25% clip. It's just brick after brick after brick, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. They've been getting the same type of shots up as before, it's just that they can't make them. In the bubble, they've dropped 10 percentage points on open threes. As a player, that's literally like going from Kyle Korver to Bobby Portis. And it doesn't help that Bradley is away and that Rondo is on the sidelines, particularly with a first round matchup with the best guard tandem in the playoffs right now. Dame and CJ, just like every other team, scorched the Lakers in Game 1. And are going to do it again and again in the coming games. Even LeBron himself, in his super deflective fashion, said himself that the Blazers were definitely capable of beating them.
I'm not going in with that mindset as 1 versus 8. It's 2 teams that have the ability to advance.
And I agree. The Lakers weren't a great three-point shooting team this entire season, but they didn't try to rely on it. Only 4 teams in these playoffs took less threes than LA has, and that's saying something given LeBron's history with team shooting. They've mostly gotten by on the dominance of LeBron and AD, their defense, fast break points, and the like. All of those things are great though, but if you can't shoot, none of that really matters. In Game 1 versus the Blazers, the Lakers shot 17% on shots that weren't dunks or layups. Well, that's definitely a bit fluky. That actually compares to the rest of the shooting they've had in the bubble. From mid-range in the 8 seeding games, they shot 20% from mid-range and 30% from 3. And before you think that 30% is better than 20%, that's still 5 points below league average, and the same percentage that MVP Russell Westbrook had on his OKC Thunder. Not what you want from a championship squad. Dame and his Trailblazers are on a mission, and it doesn't look like LA has the capacity to stop this freight train. According to NBA stats, Alex Caruso is the best perimeter defender that they have against the Blazers. Now, we all know that it's LeBron, but he is, as we all know, 35 years old. He's got a failing offense to take care of. He isn't capable right now of guarding ISOs from 2 of the top guards in the league. So he's got to hope that KCP and Danny Green can kick it into high gear on both ends of the floor, and that their shooting improves, and that their defense doesn't fold much more, and that he can integrate J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters effectively into the offense, and hope that Rajon Rondo can come back from injury not rusty, and did I mention that they're still in the Western Conference? Up next, even if they get past the Trailblazers, which is still up in airs, they've got a fully healthy Houston Rockets team to deal with. An offensive beast that has a guard duo even better than Dame and CJ. And if they get past that, well, then they've got to meet up with the Clippers most likely in the Western Conference Finals. And as you've noticed, I haven't mentioned the Clippers once, because they're doing alright. You know, except for Paul George. I want the PG slander to stop, man, for real. Now, can they get past all of that with all of the troubles that we just talked about? I don't think so. And I don't think Milwaukee will make it either. Something about Disney World, or maybe the pandemic, or maybe the lack of fans, completely threw off 2 of the best teams in the NBA, and something shook them to the point where they're just not themselves. Now, the 2 faces in the NBA, LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo, both favorites to seize the season, are probably gonna have it slip out of their hands in Orlando. The surest things of this season were completely uprooted, just like everything else in 2020. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you think down below. Jana.